This is the Wheatstone Broadcasting Corporation.
I'm Scott Fybush from Fybush.com. Here at the Wheatstone booth, we're talking with Jim Hibbard, owner of Pacific Mobile Recorders. Welcome. Jim, you've been working lately with some fairly high-profile shows, including Dan Patrick and Rich Eisen. Talk to me a little bit about where we are right now in studio design, and particularly in this integration now where everything is both a radio show and a TV show and a stream. What does this require engineers now to be thinking about in planning studio design?
Well, it has changed because everything that we're doing these days is radio with television. You know, in the case of Dan Patrick and Rich Eisen, these are syndicated radio shows that are also televised on multiple networks. So it's very important for us to do radio that sounds good and also has a look for television.
So you can't do what you would do with TV and just stick a lav mic on somebody and be done with it.
Well, in the case of the Rich Eisen show, the main microphones are lavs. And we have lavs, and we're using the M4 processors to process the lavs, the lavalier microphones, because it's a it's a television set. Mm-hmm. It's a big live room with glass on three sides and a mirror behind.
How do you pull it off? How do you manage to avoid having it have that hollow sound that's so typical of TV?
That particular one, we had to use a television box called a cedar, and it's an active box that you use like an aux end, and it's magic. It just takes the ambience away, and that's the only way that we could get away with making the show sound like a radio show.
And then on the flip side with Dan Patrick, you have a radio show that happens to be on TV, so you've got radio studio mics in front of you, and then you got to think about lighting and camera angles.
Well, yes, but the guys sit down and they talk, and when they're doing the radio show, they're sitting and they're talking properly into their radio mics, and that's what they do. And then when they go to a break, television breaks are shorter than radio breaks. They get up and they do what they call the look-ins, and the look-ins they walk around, and then they're on the lavalier mics only for those look-ins. And they throw the ball and they do this sort of thing. So that's one thing that you have to get integrated. The other thing is television IFBS versus headphones. It's like Dan Patrick guys, they wear headphones. Rich Eisen guys have IFBs. And we've also got directors and producers and talking in their ear. And so we've had to integrate Wheatstone in with ClearCom or whatever in the wireless IFBs. And so when you talk and you push a button, it interrupts the ears. And so that's a whole nother thing that you have to work on.
What are some of the challenges behind the scenes in making that all work, especially if you're dealing then, in some cases you've got TV control rooms that are not right on site, that are connected and controlling from a distance. How do you make all that play together? What are some of the challenges people face?
We use some audio over IP to get audio for the directors. We actually use the Tie-Line products. And then we have a box called a data probe that's closures. So the closures from a ClearCom in Los Angeles is closing a LIO, GPIO port on a Wheatstone blade in New York.
What are some of the challenges? What are some of the lessons that you've learned from putting these together over the years? What do you advise now? Somebody's doing a new studio build out, and they're assuming, okay, there's going to be some sort of video now involved in what has traditionally just been a radio studio. What advice would you give to people? What are some of the things maybe that they don't think about right away and should going into a project?
Well, first thing is you got to have an open mind. Those standards are going to go out the window because it's television. The placement of the microphones, you can't have a microphone where you want to put it. You have to have it below. When you do a radio show, you play your commercials, you play your music, you do a talk show. You might have a producer that's in the booth that's talking to you. Now you possibly have a director and a producer that's in another city talking to you. Sometimes they talk to the local producer. Sometimes they talk directly to the talent.
In terms of the actual physical design of the studio, now you're dealing with lighting. You're dealing potentially with heat. You may not be able to use all the audio treatments that you would want to use on walls that you could if it were just radio.
We do a lot more in the processing. And that's why I really like the M4s. The downward expansion, hands down, is my favorite of all of the processors out there because I can really make it sound good.
Of course, doing all the audio over IP, I imagine, makes some of these things easier that would be nearly impossible on an old analog.
Oh, absolutely. Configuration, because you have to configure from afar. to be able to use the Class E to get in and check a configuration of the console, being able to change routing changes. You do that. There's always going to be something new. There's somebody going to have a different talent. The talent's going to come in. They're going to have maybe 3 or 4 different people. You might have, at the last minute, you may have some of the guys that are going to be on radio that are on their lavalier microphones because they're getting ready and they're walking up, and you've got to be able to go, whoa, we got to get that signal in quick now, and not have phase between lavalier and stick mics or broadcast mics. So there's some challenges.
Whole new world to think about.
Whole new world to think about.
Jim Hibbard from Pacific Media Recorder Studios, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.